Health and Human Services plans to shutter or downsize several health agencies, including the Center for Disease Control. The Department of Health and Human Services said today that it plans to cut 10,000 full-time jobs across several agencies as part of a broader effort by the Trump administration to restructure many parts of the federal government. The cuts, part of the White House reduction in force plan, that's what they're calling it. These cuts were expected to effectively shutter or downsize multiple departments at the Center for Disease Control and Prevention and other health agencies, potentially jeopardizing public health efforts. What are we talking about? HHS oversees 13 agencies, including the CDC, the Food and Drug Administration, and the National Institutes of Health. Health and Human Services said today that 28 divisions in the health department contain quote unquote redundant units, and that the restructuring plan will consolidate them into 15 divisions. In other news that really hits close to home, wildfires are raging on North and South Carolina as more firefighters arrive. The Guardian reporting that at least a half a dozen large wildfires continue to burn in the Blue Ridge Mountains of South Carolina and North Carolina today, leading to states of emergency and evacuations as firefighters deployed from other parts of the United States to help bring the blazes under control. In North Carolina, progress was being made in containing two of the largest wildfires burning in the mountains, but officials warned that fire danger remained from dry and windy conditions. And then the news was worse. It was worse in South Carolina, where two fires nearly doubled in size on Wednesday. Hundreds of people have been asked to leave their homes in the two states. Of course, Wednesday's dry weather led to several new fires in western North Carolina and prompted the state's governor, Josh Stein, to declare a state of emergency in 34 western counties. At least 9 fires were active in that part of the state. And so our hearts are going out to our leaders, learners, and listeners in North and South Carolina. For folks in Southern California, where our home station is located, we certainly understand how disorienting it can be, trying to keep your family safe from these wildfires. But make sure you're paying extra close attention to news as you get it from local officials. Speaking of local, in Los Angeles, communities are rebuilding after the LA fires despite a lack of soil testing for toxic substances. The LA Times is reporting that in Altadena and the Pacific Palisades neighborhood, reconstruction has begun despite the fact that soil on affected properties has not been tested for toxic substances. This doesn't sound good. The Federal Emergency Management Agency's controversial decision to forego soil testing in communities burned in the Eaton and Palisades wildfire sparked pushback Wednesday as California lawmakers question whether the practice will prevent residents from knowing if there are toxic substances on the land before building begins. Federally hired cleanup crews have been removing ash and debris in addition to 6-inch layers of topsoil from buildings burned by the wildfires. But asked last month by the Times, FEMA and the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, they confirmed that they won't test the soil. They won't test the soil at these properties after they finish their cleanup, breaking with a long-standing practice that was intended to ensure that homes and schools don't still contain excessive levels of harmful chemicals after environmental disasters such as wildfires. And so why the change? Why the sudden change in policy? Who does that benefit? I can't imagine that this benefits the families in Altadena and Pasadena and the Palisades and Pasadena for that matter. We're going to continue to keep our eye on this. And just as a reminder, every Saturday, James Farr, my colleague, he hosts the show of record that is staying on top of the recovery and rebuild efforts in Altadena. I am sure this Saturday, starting at 10 a.m. Pacific, he will be on top of this, sussing this story out. Finally, Wisconsin provides a critical test for Democrats' anti-Elon Musk playbook. NBC News also reporting that next week's Wisconsin Supreme Court race is emerging as the first big test of Democrats' anti-Elon Musk strategy as the party searches for a winning message following its loss to President Trump in November. Trump's billionaire advisor has been a major player in the technically nonpartisan judicial race. Musk's super PAC has emerged as the top spender in the contest, offered $100 to Wisconsin voters to sign a petition to oppose activist judges and give away $1 million to a petition signer. And Musk often posts about the election on his X feed. So we'll be diving into this headline and so many more with our expert Washington reporting roundtable, including Akayla Gardner of Bloomberg News and Donnell Suggs of the Atlanta Voice. You are listening to and streaming A More Perfect Union on KBLA Talk 1580. More when we come forward.
You're listening to A More Perfect Union on KBLA Talk 1580. We've got a lot to talk about. Before the fire, Altadena was a real-life Wakanda. A thriving Black oasis just 15 miles from downtown Los Angeles. 80% Black residents were homeowners, building intergenerational wealth against the odds. It was a hub of Black-owned businesses, churches, and cultural institutions. It stood as a symbol of Black resilience and economic independence. Then, in a matter of hours, it was gone. The fire tore through homes, swallowed businesses, and left behind a painful void. But was it just an unstoppable act of nature, or was negligence involved? Did officials ignore early warning signs? Were the response efforts delayed or insufficient? What role, if any, did corporate or government failures play? Survivors are demanding answers. Don't miss our KBLA Talk 1580 Town Hall. The Eaton-Altadena Fire, 100 days and counting, on Wednesday, April 16th, 4 to 6 p.m. at the Robinson Park Recreation Center, 1081 North Fair Oaks in Pasadena. Join Dominic DePrima, Nii-Quartelai Corte, James Farr, Tavis Smiley, and a panel of survivors, community leaders, and experts as we commemorate day 100 since the wildfires flared up, and we discuss where we go from here. It's KBLA's Eaton-Altadena Fire, 100 days and counting Town Hall, Wednesday, April 16th, 4 to 6 p.m. at the Robinson Park Recreation Center in Pasadena. Light refreshments to follow. Admission is free, but sign-up is required at our KBLA1580.com website. This community call to action is brought to you by KBLA Talk 1580 and Quinn Emanuel. At KBLA Talk 1580, we've got your black.
Can your pad absorb everything and stay fresh? Always Radiant with Flex Foam can. Get up to 0 leaks, 0 odor, and 0 feel. Because Flex Foam is the only pad with a flexible foam core. You heard me, foam. Always Radiant is so thin, it feels like nothing, yet protects like nothing else. Can your pad do that? For up to 100% leak-free protection, try Always Radiant to see what Flex Foam can do for you.
Small businesses are the heart of America. But you don't have to go it alone. As the nation's largest nonprofit resource of expert business mentoring, SCORE has helped millions of entrepreneurs build their businesses for free. Get the connections, education, and guidance you need with SCORE. We're ready to help. Find a mentor today at score.org.
Hit me! National News The Consequence. Informed opinion. And analysis beyond the headlines. You're listening to A More Perfect Union on KBLA Talk 1580.
You are listening to and streaming A More Perfect Union on KBLA Talk 1580. I'm Dr. Nii-Quartelai Corte, and really delighted to welcome to the show. I can't believe, is this the first time? I think this is the first time.
It is the first time, and it shouldn't be.
we already got it on and popping here. Really delighted to welcome my friend and colleague Akayla Gardner. She's the White House correspondent for Bloomberg News, and what a busy week! Another busy week that
It's
we've
always
had
a busy
here in
week.
Washington. My goodness. Let's first start off with some news that just broke this afternoon. And for folks who are less familiar, let me just say, I think a lot of eyes are on the courts. And there's a big looming question, how far are the courts going to go to be a check and balance? We know that a judge says that he will order the government to preserve signal messages about the Houthi military strike. This is a story that has really sucked up the oxygen here in Washington this week. A federal judge today ordered the Trump administration to preserve records for a text message chat in which senior national security officials discussed sensitive details of plans for a U.S. military strike against Yemen's Houthis. The U.S. district judge barred the administration officials from destroying messages that were sent over the encrypted messaging app Signal earlier this month. Akayla, it seems that the White House is trying to quickly just sort of turn the page on this. We saw the White House, basically say nothing to see here. Are we looking at sort of the Democrats' version of Benghazi here?
Well, it was really interesting today because the White House press secretary seemed to have somewhat of a shift in tone from yesterday when she called basically the coverage of the Signal group chat leak really a hoax. She called it a witch hunt. And today there was much softer tone. I think that the concerns from the Hill, particularly from Republicans in the Senate and the House, are starting to concern the White House. There are a bipartisan group of lawmakers really now, of course, Democrats, but also some Republicans who want more information, who want private briefings to get a better understanding of how this happened. There is a lot of Republicans, even though the White House says this is not classified information, that says at the time that Pete Hegseth sent those messages, that information would have been classified and could have jeopardized the mission that played out in the Middle East that strike the Houthis. And so it seems that they're starting to sort of get the message, particularly from that bipartisan group of lawmakers there. But I think that that judge ruling that you just talked about is really about the fact that according to the screenshots that The Atlantic published, that group chat was set to disappearing messages on Signal. So after a certain amount of time, those text messages would not be recorded, and that would violate a law that applies to all government officials, that they need to retain these kinds of communications for the record. And some government officials don't even receive text for this reason because they want to avoid having to keep those records outside of those emails. And so there's a lot of people that frankly say this was a mistake. They want to understand why this happened. There's some people who give them the benefit of the doubt and said, sometimes you're in a crunch, but there's a lot of people that say this mistake can't happen again. And they're worried that there's other instances that people don't know about outside of this one group chat.
Have you heard anything from any former Biden administration officials, helping us to understand just sort of, the proper way in which this information is shared? I always thought that, folks had to use a SCIF or, they had to go through very specific channels to exchange any sensitive, dare I say, even classified information. But, what are you hearing from former Biden officials?
Yeah, there's a lot of former Biden officials who have been very critical of how this has been handled. But you have heard President Trump say these are conversations that he wants to see happen in person. He wants to see these sorts of conversations happening in the Situation Room, and yet he still seemed to leave the door open for potentially still using Signal. The White House says, it's the gold standard when it comes to encrypted messages, and there's just sometimes circumstances where they can't meet in person. But there's still people who say there's computers specifically for this kind of communication. It's called high-side devices. So there are, virtual devices that people can still communicate on that are approved for these kinds of discussions if they cannot happen in person, but yet they're still leaving the door open potentially to have conversations on Signal. And I think that's a question that lawmakers want to know about. If that is an avenue that the president is approving for communications to happen, then there certainly needs to be protocols put into place.
Yeah. There are a number of folks that are on this case. In addition to the White House counsel's office, we know that the national security team is on it, and apparently even Elon Musk's Doge team is somehow participating in some sort of investigation around this. What can you tell us about Elon Musk's role in Signalgate?
Honestly, I would love to know more. I feel like I can't offer much, but yes, the White House has said that he has been looking into this. He has technical experts. We don't know exactly who that is, but I mean, he's become this catch-all really in the administration. They kind of turn to him for advice on anything. He's really overseeing this huge restructuring in government. You mentioned the HHS just cut 10,000 people today. That agency is down about a fourth from since Trump took office. And so he's really become pretty much one of the closest allies to President Trump. We saw them do a joint interview together. We've seen him share the stage with him on several occasions, seeming to almost sit next to him in terms of power, even over JD Vance, who is the vice president. So he is just a large looming figure over this White House.
And speaking of large looming figure, for folks who are less familiar, you recently published a piece on Bloomberg News about Musk's presence. And the headline reads, "Musk's presence intrudes even when he's not in the room." What can you tell us about what folks are too afraid to say in mixed company, what they're too afraid to say in public about their working relationship with Elon Musk at the White House?
Well, I was just at a cabinet meeting earlier this week. This was the second cabinet meeting with Elon Musk in the room, and it really showed how much the cabinet is really getting in line with his push to reduce spending, to reduce the workforce. And we saw really members of the cabinet really go around the table and talk about what they're doing at their various agencies to cut contracts, especially related to diversity and inclusion. But that story in particular was about Pete Hegseth, who is the defense secretary, who announced with President Trump a few days ago that Boeing had just won a contract to build the next generation of fighter jets. But Elon Musk has billions of dollars in contracts specifically with the Defense Department. He has contracts elsewhere. And so there's this huge question of whether there is a conflict of interest. He has said many times that he does not have a conflict of interest. This is not a role that he needs to increase his funding. But if he has contracts, can he be able to impartially make cuts like he has made at other agencies to contracts that potentially would or maybe would not have impacted his business had he not been overseeing it? So there's certainly those questions about whether he can be an impartial broker, especially because the Defense Department has a huge budget. It makes up a really large portion of our discretionary budget. And so it's really a target that the Trump administration says they're looking into.
And just for our leaders, learners, and listeners' edification, talk to us about how conflict of interest are typically ironed out. You typically don't have the person being accused of having a conflict of interest say, "Nothing to see here. I don't have a conflict." There's a reason why we have inspectors generals. There's a reason why we have public disclosures where people share their tax returns. And when that doesn't happen, who is there around to say, wait a minute, there's a conflict of interest, and more importantly, who's going to hold them accountable?
Well, that's why Elon Musk's designation is really important. He's considered a special government employee, basically an advisor. So it's not really the same level of scrutiny that you would have if you were considered a full cabinet member, especially when it comes to him potentially divesting from some of his divestments here. But again, he has billions of dollars in these federal contracts. And so it certainly raises the question of whether he can be impartial. He also has this deal going right now with FAA to potentially redo air traffic control after we've seen, multiple plane crashes. And so he's expected to have a deal with his Starlink internet company, essentially, and the government.
And it's interesting. I mean, as you note in your article, Hegseth, who has been a very vocal supporter of Elon Musk's mission as the head of the Department of Government Efficiency, he announced that he's cut more than $800 million in contracts and projects and other spending over the first few weeks of the DoD partnership with DOGE. Any indication on whether or not any of those contracts included Elon Musk's businesses or business interest?
There's no indication that Elon Musk's businesses were impacted. Elon Musk continues to say that there is transparency around the cuts that they are making. There is this Doge websites where they do seem to list some of the cuts that they've made, but I've tried to navigate that website, and it's often very hard to understand how much was cut, what exactly the functions of the contract were. So it's very hard, honestly, for journalists to report on this. You often have to, find people who are willing to talk to you to really explain what's happening in a lot of these agencies, because it really is so hard to understand. I've been covering the education department, and that staff has been cut almost by nearly half. And so there's serious questions there about how that could impact the federal student aid office, where hundreds of people were cut, and how that could potentially impact borrowers. But they say that there is transparency, but I will say, just as a reporter, it can be difficult to navigate the website that they have, and even just the tweets that are just simply not very detailed as to what they're cutting.
I mean, wow, yikes! It's definitely change management. This is almost everything not to do in change management at any organization, let alone the federal government. I mean, it doesn't really seem like this White House is interested in developing, or yet alone socializing plans publicly, right? It really seems like it's that hurry up and break it, move fast kind of thinking that is pretty pervasive in the tech industry, no?
I think that is Donald Trump's mindset. I mean, he is shutting down a lot of agencies, talking about the education department, FEMA. I think this is just part of his view of transforming government. And I think it really leaves the question as to, whenever his reign is over after these 4 years, what does that mean for a potential Democratic successor? What does that mean for a potential Republican successor? Will they reinstate some of these programs? Will the government simply just run without it? And I think that's just a question that people will have to endure, especially because this is happening so quickly that seemingly by the end of his administration, a lot of these things potentially could be done. They say that they need Congress's help, for example, to shut down the education department. But the rate of cuts that they are going at, they could do something similar that they've already done with CFPB, with USAID, which were also both created by Congress, where they could essentially make them not functional anymore. They could have very few employees, or the employees that are absorbed into another agency. And so it certainly leaves that question of how far is too far, especially when it comes to the law. And I think the administration has really been testing those bounds.
Well, that's not the only test the administration is looking at. When we come forward, we're going to dive into another big splashy headline today. USA Today reporting that President Trump withdraws Elise Stefanik's nomination as UN ambassador. President Trump said today that he's withdrawing the nomination of Representative Stefanik to represent the United States at the United Nations amid growing concerns from Republicans about holding on to their narrow majority in the U.S. House of Representatives. We're going to get Akayla's take on this, along with our friend and colleague, Donnell Suggs, the editor-in-chief of the Atlanta Voice, when we come forward. You are listening to and streaming A More Perfect Union on KBLA Talk 1580.
If you're looking to be engaged, enlightened, and empowered about issues related to national politics, elections, identity, culture change, and social justice, you've tuned into the right place. A More Perfect Union continues when we come forward.
I'm Mike Island with 4 things you should know on the Black Information Network. President Trump's new tariffs on automobiles is causing uncertainty. Trump signed an executive order putting 25% tariffs on foreign-made cars and trucks to go into effect in less than a week. The Portland, Oregon Public School District and the Oregon School Activities Association is under investigation by the U.S. Department of Education for allowing a transgender student athlete to compete in track events against girls. Police believe an ongoing conflict at school led to the deadly shooting of a teenager in Queens. They say 16-year-old Sincere Jasmine, who is African-American, was shot in the chest after he and another teen got off a bus. And President Trump may consider extending the deadline for the upcoming TikTok ban. Speaking to reporters, Trump said he could extend the deadline if he wants to. I'm Mike Island on your home for Black News First, the Black Information Network, and BINnews.com.
West LA, the 405 south to the 10 east connector. There's a crash being cleared out of lanes. It's loading up the 10 eastbound out of Santa Monica, getting away from Cloverfield and beyond. You're still slow across Mid-City all the way to the 5 in Boyle Heights. The drive on the 110 northbound slows in South LA from the 105 all the way to Stadium Way. Southbound is crowding up from almost Pasadena Avenue as you make your way back towards Stadium Way. Heavy and slow beyond to Manchester Avenue. Rank 5 southbound still tough away from Alameda. As you continue ahead towards Stadium Way, delays heavy beyond to the 605.
Would you like your community to be recognized as a beautiful and clean place to live? Help the place you love become a designated Clean California community. Take the pledge today at cleanca.com. Zero litter is the goal.
Is this the time?
This is the KBLA Sports Minute with Ray Richardson.
The LA Sparks are making plans to retire Candace Parker's number 3 jersey. The ceremony for the WNBA legend is scheduled for halftime of the Sparks' June 29th game against the Chicago Sky at Crypto.com. Parker played 13 of her 16 WNBA seasons with the Sparks. The 5-time All-Star led the Sparks to 3 WNBA championships, was MVP in 2008, and Defensive Player of the Year in 2020. Parker is the 3rd Sparks player to have her jersey retired. She joins Lisa Leslie and Penny Toller. During her career with the Sparks, Parker averaged 16.9 points and 8.6 rebounds. Parker holds the Sparks franchise record in assists with 1,331. Today is opening day for Major League Baseball. The Dodgers are at home against the Detroit Tigers. The Dodgers are trying to become the first team in 25 years to win 2 straight World Series. The Yankees did it in 2000. No debates, no speculation, just the info you need. That's your KBLA Sports Minute. I'm Ray Richardson on KBLA Talk 1580.
Yeah, y'all, come on. Here come the drums.
At KBLA Talk 1580, we fight the power every day.
Yeah, gotta give us what we want. Gotta give us what we need. Hey.
I listen to KBLA and I love the commercials. I know what the commercials mean. I also, if I'm looking and trying to figure something out, I need something to talk to me that might hit me. And it happens on TV because, you know, every time they show a sporting event, they got the pharmaceutical companies back to back telling people how to fix the sickness on the same stuff that they sell them. So we get it.
Yep, we get it too, Chuck D. And that's why at KBLA Talk 1580, we don't black down.
Drop it! Our freedom of speech is freedom of death. We got to fight the powers that be. Fight the power! Fight the power!
Looking for a purposeful and passionate way to make a difference in your community? Volunteer with our Senior Medicare Patrol and help prevent Medicare fraud. S&P volunteers work in their community educating peers about healthcare fraud and how to prevent and detect it. Free training starts soon. Check us out online or at an S&P open house near you. We're on a mission to stop fraud. Join our team. You make a difference. Visit caspvolunteer.org. Protect yourself from Medicare card scams. Scammers may call, email, or even knock on your door claiming they need your Medicare info, asking for money or threatening to cancel your benefits. Don't fall for it. It's a scam. Remember, Medicare doesn't need to verify your information. They already have it. Medicare won't charge you for a new card and will never threaten to cancel benefits. Check your Medicare statements for suspicious charges and report scams to the California Senior Medicare Patrol at 1-855-613-7080. We're here to help.
KBLA Talk 1580. Racism, voter suppression, miseducation, wealth building, gun violence, homelessness. What's on your mind? We're listening around the clock. We've got a lot to talk about. KBLA Talk 1580. KBLA Talk 1580. We've got a lot to talk about.
KBLA Talk 1580 reminds you that we keep us safe. The Live Your Life organization mentors young women, helping them break negative mindsets and see beyond their surroundings. Through career exposure and hands-on training, they're encouraged to think big, stay focused, and make positive choices. Founded by Nikisha, Mama Boo Smith, who transformed her life to become a community leader. Live Your Life is changing lives, but they need your help. They're raising funds to keep their new building open and expand their program. Your donations will support food, clothes, hygiene products, and holiday giveaways. Visit liveyourlife32.com. That's LIVEYOLIFE32.com to help today. This is a community call to action from KBLA Talk 1580.
Now back to building a more perfect union on KBLA Talk 1580.
You are listening to and streaming A More Perfect Union on KBLA Talk 1580. I'm Dr. Nii-Quartelai Corte, and it's always so much more fun on air with your friends. Akayla Gardner, the White House correspondent for Bloomberg News, is with us, along with Donnell Suggs, the editor-in-chief of Atlanta Voice, holding it down. How y'all doing?
Fantastic. Good. Quick note, I'm not your friend. I'm your brother.
That's right. You're my friend.
We share gummy bears on the campaign trail. They don't get closer than that.
It's true. They don't really feed you when you are covering the president and vice president on the campaign trail. And so if you have a protein bar or a gummy bear, at some point you are a rock star in the press pool, as was the case with Donnell Suggs. Speaking of the campaign trail, it looks like Elise Stefanik is going to be staying in the U.S. House of Representatives and staying on that campaign trail to make sure that Republicans maintain the House. Trump, in a post on Truth Social, said that he asked Stefanik to remain in Congress, help advance his legislative agenda, ending the nomination of the 5-term Congresswoman and close Trump ally to be the top U.S. diplomat for the UN. Donnell, what do you make of this? Is Trump getting scared? Are the Republicans a little scared that they might lose the House?
I think they started out the gate really fast and tumbled down the hill. And it's like, wait a minute, we got to slow down. We got to slow down for a minute. You don't want to start targeting everybody and then to get too much attention. And I think that's what's been happening. As I was at the inauguration, and from that point forward, it was like hyperspeed. And I don't think they want to. They don't want to keep on kind of forcing the issue, and especially don't want to lose the House, without a doubt.
Akayla, what say you? Is this a sign that the Republican coalition has some cracks at the moment?
Well, I will say this withdrawal was surprising in general because Elise Stefanik was someone who's seen as her nomination being really firm, that she was expected to get bipartisan support. But I think more than it being about whether she could lose her seat, it was the amount of time it would take potentially to find out whether a Republican or a Democrat could get her seat, because New York has a law that says it would take 90 days for a special election to take place. So potentially we wouldn't have seen an election in New York until this summer. And that could really run up against the deadline that Speaker Johnson and the House Republican caucus has really set for themselves when it comes to passing tax cuts, raising the debt limit. So they're really clearly feeling uncertain about their margins right now. They only have a 5-seat majority. And there are those House Freedom Caucus members, those really hardline conservatives who have been really pushing up against and opposing some opposition lately because they want to see bigger tax cut. There's people that were not really happy with the number that they set for reconciliation there. And so I think the White House at least has told us at Bloomberg that they were feeling that it was already going to be tough without her, and they felt losing her was just going to make it a lot worse. But Elise Stefanik is in a really strange position here because she was the highest ranking female in the House Republican caucus. Now she does not have a leadership seat. She's not on any committees. Johnson says he is creating some kind of leadership position for her, but we have no idea what that is and what that will look like. But she gave up a lot expecting to be in this position, and now she's not.
Well, and that's just Representative Stefanik. There are a pair of special elections that are just around the corner. Next Tuesday in Florida will determine who replaces former GOP reps Michael Waltz and Matt Gaetz. Of course, Waltz, he's been real busy this week, serving as Trump's national security advisor. And at the very center of the TextGate, what are they calling it?
Signalgate.
Signalgate.
That's what they're calling it. Yes, right at the center of that. And then, of course, Matt Gaetz was nominated to be Attorney General and had to withdraw his nomination. And so those two races are afoot. Why aren't Democrats talking more about this? There's a lot of anxiety. There's a lot of frustration in communities across the country. You have thousands, tens of thousands of federal workers that are losing their jobs. You have tariffs being slapped on industry after industry, driving up prices. Why aren't Democrats channeling the disappointment and the rage that people are feeling into these special elections that are right around the corner? Donnell.
I feel like there's been more dialogue. I know it's not as much as you might like, but there's been at least some dialogue where they're recognizing this is a moment for them. So they are talking about it more on the news channels and what have you. So it's more than what's normally been happening, which is nothing. So they're taking advantage of it, maybe not as much advantage as they should, but there's been dialogue about that. And here in Georgia, our representatives, our senators, for example, are definitely talking about that. John Ossoff had a rally this past weekend, and he had mentioned Signalgate a couple of times and how people are feeling. So they're definitely taking a little bit of advantage of it. It's better than nothing.
Akayla, what say you? Are Democrats doing enough to channel this energy around, an imperial Trump presidency? Are they doing enough to channel that into these special elections that could actually make a difference in the control of the House?
Well, I will say right before I joined this, Trump did join 2 tele-rallies for both of these candidates in Florida. And something that stuck out to me is he mentioned Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid on both of those calls. And that is a huge issue in Florida, especially because there's a high number of elderly voters, there's a high number of retirees there. And this is something that I've been hearing, especially from Democrat consultants, that they want to hear Democrats talking about more. Voters continue to say that they see the economy as the most important issue. And they thought Donald Trump was the person that was going to make them feel more confident about the economy. But we've seen in surveys now, people are feeling less confident about the economy. And that has a huge thing to do with tariffs. And people are really concerned about how this could eventually trickle down to consumers, whether it means that they're going to be paying more at the grocery store or for their cars in various sectors. And so that's something that Democrats feel like there needs to be more people talking about it. You do have people like Bernie Sanders and AOC. They're starting to get out in Republican districts. And that is a strategy we're starting to see some other people, especially in the House, starting to do, some other Congress members. And that the idea there is to really make Republicans feel the heat, especially when it comes to reconciliation. Democrats know they do not have power, but if they can make them feel a little bit uncomfortable with 2026 around the corner, then hopefully that can give them some leverage in those conversations.
Donnell, in your piece in the Atlanta Voice, where you write about John Ossoff on the campaign trail, you mentioned it's called the Rally for Our Republic. That's how this event was billed. There are a number of people that say that message may not be all that effective. It feels very much like we've got to protect our democracy. And there are a number of voters that felt like that sort of messaging kind of went over their head. They didn't really relate to it. Is there any indication from some of the messages that John Ossoff deployed at that rally that Democrats in Georgia are talking and moving a little bit differently than they did in the 24 election cycle?
It's funny that you asked me that, because I remember a bunch of times you and I were on the campaign trail in places full of Democrats and fans of the former vice president, and you felt the energy there, and ultimately we missed the target. Well, it kind of felt like that on Saturday, despite the fact that Ossoff's seat isn't up until 2026. In 2025, barely in spring, he's already rallying and saying, hey, look, this isn't the way we want to go. Let's get out there early instead of waiting until sometime next summer to start shooting that message. So I feel there is a different energy behind that. We missed the target before, or we didn't hit the target hard enough. And now they're getting out early and saying, look, guys, I told you, see what's happening? Let's start rallying earlier. Let's start getting together and getting this energy way before we need it, because look what's happening. And it felt like that in that room. Now, that wasn't as big as the rooms that you and I were in a lot of cases, but it was a start. And from what I've been told by some sources, there's going to be more like that. Now, obviously, Warnock's way off. He's 2 years away, but Ossoff's a year away. And that feels like a trend. Well, like the young lady just mentioned with AOC and Bernie Sanders kind of getting out there saying, hey, this is not the country you want, right? well, let's start getting together and winning these small battles so we can ultimately win the war, or try to.
Well, we certainly know in winning those small battles, we know that Black men will play a significant role, as a number of folks are saying, Black men may have emerged as a swing voter group in national elections. When we come forward, I want to keep our Reporters Roundtable just a little while longer to weigh in on this focus group, as reported by NBC News, of Black men who back Trump, how they approve of his presidency, but raise some concerns about Doge. We're going to dig into that just a little bit. And no Reporters Roundtable here would be complete without giving Akayla and Donnell a chance to weigh in on the enduring legacy of the Black press, of course, riffing off of a piece that Donnell recently wrote for the Atlanta Voice. You are listening to and streaming A More Perfect Union on KBLA Talk 1580. More of our Reporters Roundtable when we come forward.
Striving to make America a nation as good as its promise. This is A More Perfect Union on KBLA Talk 1580. We've got a lot to talk about.
They say the hardest part of getting something done is getting started. Well, we did that 30 years ago when California first took on the tobacco industry. Now, smoking is down 60%, lung cancer 42%. A couple of our cities have already ended tobacco sales. A California without big tobacco isn't just possible, it's already happening. See our progress at undo.org.
Small businesses are the heart of America. But you don't have to go it alone. As the nation's largest nonprofit resource of expert business mentoring, SCORE has helped millions of entrepreneurs build their businesses for free. Get the connections, education, and guidance you need with SCORE. We're ready to help. Find a mentor today at score.org.
KBLA Talk 1580. We've got a lot to talk about.
Imagine a Los Angeles where everyone can thrive, where communities have access to the resources they need to succeed. That's the vision of Detours Mentoring Group, Inc. They're dedicated to improving life in LA County by providing educational support, employment assistance, and spaces for community engagement. By 2050, they want LA to be the best place to connect, create, learn, live, and play. They're working toward an education system that's well-resourced and culturally responsive, becoming a hub for artists and innovators, and making sure everyone has access to healthy food, quality healthcare, and safe housing. It's about building a future where we all have the chance to succeed. We invite you to learn more about their mission and get involved with Detours Mentoring Group, Inc. This is a community call to action from KBLA Talk 1580.
The California Crusader newspaper would like to thank all of our subscribers for their support throughout the years, proudly serving the South Los Angeles and South Bay areas for more than 40 years. The California Crusader is a multicultural, Black-owned, adjudicated newspaper that focuses on providing newsworthy information to the people in our community. We're constantly looking for ways to assist businesses in our community to connect with our subscribers. We provide low-cost, effective ways to promote your business with our reasonable and affordable advertising rates. You can participate by suggesting, sharing, and submitting your stories on the California Crusader newspaper Community Share Facebook group page, or visit our website at cal-cruise-news.com. That's cal-cruise-news.com. Then click on the Submit Now button located on the top right corner of the homepage, or text CCN to 42828. Again, text CCN to 42828. The California Crusader newspaper, working together to build a better community for our future. Subscribe today.
We face tragedy, but we don't fall into despair. We continue our work to build a more perfect union.
You are listening to and streaming A More Perfect Union on KBLA Talk 1580. I'm Dr. Nii-Quartelai, and really delighted to be in conversation with Akayla Gardner, the White House correspondent for Bloomberg News. Also, Donnell Suggs, the editor-in-chief of the Atlanta Voice. So listen, NBC News today reported on this focus group that really got my attention. I have a feeling it might have gotten yours as well. It was a focus group on Black men who backed Trump, and this new conversation with Black men who voted for Trump in swing states in November was pretty enlightening. Some of these men who participated in this recent focus group, they had some things to say that I think really got my attention. 10 of the 12 participants said that they approved of Trump's early tenure during his second presidency. The results were far more mixed when it came to Elon Musk and Doge. 5 said they approved of Doge's actions. 3 said they disapproved and the rest weren't sure. Is this a sign, Akayla, that again, the coalition that came together, some people might even call it a motley crew of folks who came together to elect Trump, are these early signs that coalition is cracking?
Well, it's really interesting that you bring this up because in the election, Kamala Harris did have about the same amount of support as Joe Biden when it came to Black voters overall. Where we saw the shift towards Donald Trump was specifically amongst Black men, and even more specifically amongst younger Black men, specifically those under 30. But it's interesting that you bring up the thoughts about Doge. It sounds like overall they're happy with Donald Trump's presidency, but there's a lot of Black workers who have federal jobs. A lot of these jobs don't just exist in Washington, D.C. They're all over the country. And I think a lot of people are not aware that those are really the areas that the administration is looking to cut in a lot of cases. It's a lot of these regional offices when it comes to Veterans Affairs, when it comes to the Education Department. And so I'm sure if it's not them specifically, that they probably know or are aware of people who are getting these cuts. And I think we're still so early in this process that we have yet to see the long-term impacts when it comes to services that Americans rely on so often. We are still starting to just see the really early days of some of these offices shuttering and their employees moving out. And I don't think we're going to see or have a full picture of how this really impacts the lives of everyday people, at least for another few weeks, if not another few months.
Donnell, you are down there in Georgia. In this NBC News piece, they mentioned Jeffrey G., one of the participants in this focus group, a 57-year-old Democrat from Georgia who voted for Biden in 2020, backing Trump this time, lamented how Trump, quote, should have gone in with a scalpel instead of a blowtorch. Are you hearing similar sentiments in Georgia?
Yes, the blowtorch analogy is perfect. A lot of folks are saying they kind of heard him campaign on some of the things he's doing. I guess they weren't listening clear enough. And he kind of came right in and started working on the things he campaigned on. And they're amazed that they lost their job with the CDC, for example. And I'm like, but that's what he was campaigning on. Mm-hmm. You get a lot of folks that are saying, whoa, revisionist history. Maybe I shouldn't have went in that direction if I knew you were going to come in with a sledgehammer. But the fact of the matter is, he campaigned on it. And what we most want from our politicians is for them not to lie to us sometimes, right? And he didn't to black males in Georgia. He didn't lie to you.
Yeah. I mean, and the reality is, you know, people voted for change, right? But I think change is one of those funny words. It means different things to different people, right? And sometimes change can mean, you know, accountability. Sometimes change, you know, can mean just do what you said you would do. Do what you said you would do. Thomas A., a 49-year-old Democrat, also from Georgia, who voted for Biden in 2020 and switched to Trump in 24, said that while Doge is doing some good, he's concerned about the power that Trump has delegated to Musk. He also wondered if Doge's work could be antithetical to a push to improve the economy and help everyday Americans. You know, Akayla, you know, this, you know, aligns really nicely with what you were just saying earlier. Do you think that Doge will become a liability for this White House sooner or later?
Well, I think right now they continue to use these sort of buzzwords, fraud, waste. And those are things that I think most Americans, most even Democrats say, yes, those things exist in the government. I think it's everything outside of that people are concerned about, whether there's people that are being cut or fired that shouldn't be cut, people that are really critical to our nation's national security, who are really critical to health services. And we have seen instances of people being fired and then having to be brought back because no one knows how to work certain systems without them being there. And so I think he's already shown that he's going about this in maybe not the most thoughtful way. And I think he's admitted that as well. You know, sometimes he says, we're not always going to do the right thing and we're hoping to fix it. That is not an approach that I think everyone appreciates, if you will. They don't really like that approach. They want things to be done in a very calculated way. And the president has given Elon Musk a lot of leeway, and his team of, some people call them Doge fellows, Doge workers, who are really scattered across the government, to really make these decisions on their own. And he is just simply getting that approval and going ahead to execute those plans, essentially.
In our remaining minutes with you, I want to give you an opportunity. I want to give you both about a minute to talk about how you all are advancing the legacy of the Black press. In a moment like this, we all get to tap into a long tradition. A lot of people don't know that the Black press is about 52 years older than Black newspaper publishing. It's almost as old as this country. And the Black press has always had a role in holding government accountable, even when we didn't have all of the rights that we have today. Donnell, you wrote the piece. I want to give you the first crack at how you are advancing the legacy of the Black press in your day-to-day work.
Well, I appreciate that. I've got an advantage a lot of folks don't have. I'm the editor-in-chief of the only Black newspaper in Atlanta, which can be arguable the only really Black city in America left. So I have a chance to advance the legacy every day by covering the news just as well as the Wall Street Journal is and the New York Times, et cetera. And that's something that I live with and work with every day, and I'm very proud of. So with Atlanta, for instance, we've had 7 consecutive Black mayors. That's 50 years. There's no other city like that. No one's ever had that. So we have a special place in the zeitgeist in terms of Black leadership in this country. And I feel like being the Black newspaper's editor, I get a chance to tell those stories and continue that legacy every day. So that's a blessing.
Akayla, in about a minute, I know you don't work for a Black publication, but you are still a part of the Black press.
Yeah, I mean, we've been in those rooms before. There is not a lot of Black reporters, covering this White House in politics in general. So I definitely take it a huge responsibility and a gratitude, frankly, for the fact that I'm in the room, and I know that it matters that Black reporters are in the room. And so I'm very grateful, and I'm very much applauding the Black publications who are in the room as well. People like April Ryan, Jaron Keith Gaynor. So I very much applaud them, and I know that we're all cheering each other on. So.
Absolutely. My thanks to Akayla Gardner, the White House correspondent for Bloomberg News. Also, my brother Donnell Suggs. He is the editor-in-chief of the Atlanta Voice. He is my brother. Akayla is my sister. They are my colleagues. They are my friends. And they produce extraordinary work that we all need to tap into. And so follow Akayla Gardner, follow Donnell Suggs, because you can trust the work that they produce day in and day out. Thank you both.
Thank you for having me.
You have been listening to and streaming A More Perfect Union on KBLA Talk 1580. When we come forward, Natalie Cofield, the former assistant SBA administrator under Biden, she has a few things to say about this new SBA. You're listening to KBLA Talk 1580.
KBLA 1580 Santa Monica.
I'm Mike Island with 4 things you should know on the Black Information Network. A warrant is issued for a suspect involved in the recent shooting of Memphis rappers Say So P, who died, and Sauce Walker, who was injured. The African-American men were shot outside of a hotel. WHBQ reports police are looking for a suspect, also Black. The Department of Health and Human Services plans to cut 10,000 jobs, likely impacting a sizable number of African Americans. 10,000 employees voluntarily resigned earlier this year. A case of measles is now being reported in Central Ohio.